Match, Bumble, and Grindr dominate the online dating scene, but those companies' stocks haven't been universally loved over the past year. We're looking at how to navigate the dating landscape in your portfolio with the Yahoo Finance Playbook. Joining me now is Andrew Marok, Raymond James, analyst. Andrew, take a look at these three stocks over the past year, and it's really just been a very different story. So you take a look at Grindr, that stock's been soaring. Other two stocks have not performed nearly as well. You can see it on your screen there. Just what is going on in this space, and is this saying more about the future of the dating app space, or is this a company-specific story and there's a real reason that's driving Grindr higher here?
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I would say the biggest single factor that we see in the online dating space today is a generational transition between millennials and Gen Z, particularly in the straight dating market. These two generations have kind of antithetical preferences to how they choose to approach relationships. And since these apps were largely built by millennials for millennials, navigating this switch to the Gen Z preferences has proven quite tricky. We haven't seen that so much in the gay dating market, which is why Grindr has kind of prospered while the others have stumbled.
So, Andrew, is this then an existential threat for these services?
I think that they are having to go back to the drawing board in a pretty meaningful way. We've heard Bumble on their latest quarterly earnings call talk about a reimagination of their strategy going forward. I think that's going to manifest in a number of different and interesting ways in terms of the user experience. But yes, I think the swipe-based model that we've all been familiarized with Tinder and Bumble especially, is something that doesn't really resonate as well with Gen Z as it had with millennials.
Andrew, does Gen Z just not want to do this on their phone? I look around New York City, there's this big craze right now, you see it on TikTok, with run clubs, right? Everyone's going to run clubs now and wearing a black t-shirt to meet people on the West Side Highway. Like, is that where Gen Z wants to meet people now? Is it just not on their phones like people might have thought was the case?
I think increasingly so, that's true. It's not to say that Gen Z is abandoning the dating apps. User growth, while below historical levels, is still supporting the thesis that Gen Z and younger users are coming onto the apps at least. But they are showing a preference for in-person connections, and the run clubs are a great example of that. We have seen a rise of in-person events pointed specifically at singles, which is very much addressed at the Gen Z market. And I think uptake of those is maybe not directly competitive with the dating apps, but it is at least somewhat competitive, right? Because if you're spending time meeting people offline, you are necessarily not spending time on the apps.
So what do they do? You said they've been trying to sort of address this. They've been going back to the drawing board. Bumble, I think, has a friend service where you can meet friends through the app instead. Is that the right tack? What should they be doing?
Yeah, and I don't mean to paint the picture that every dating app in the space is suffering or is significantly impaired. We've seen apps like Hinge. Hinge does really well and resonates with Gen Z. I think the focus on more serious relationships, not a swipe-based model, is something that is quite positive. Grindr, the fact that it serves a pretty wide variety of social connection needs within the gay community is something that has resonated really well. I wish I could say exactly what the product or feature is that strikes exactly what Gen Z is looking for, but I think there will be a good amount of testing and experimentation that we'll see from some of the major apps before we see any specific go-forward path.
And Andrew, quickly, before we let you go, I'm curious about the meeting friends on these apps concepts, right? Like, we know Bumble has come out with that. Is that part of the growth story? Is it not enough of the growth story to get excited about at this point?
I think it can be interesting, but I don't know if I would necessarily frame it as like a primary driver for a recovery in the business or the stock. Bumble has put out some interesting facts when they were going through their testing phase of the BFF offering that the users who used BFF and the dating apps were significantly more engaged than dating-only users. We have seen Grindr. Grindr's usage per user is much higher than many of its relationship app peers, specifically because it serves so many non-relationship based connections for gay men. But yeah, I think it's something that could be interesting, but maybe not, the primary driver.
All right, Andrew, appreciate you joining us today and breaking that down for us.